is Mamadi. This is the Truth Breakfast Show. Today, we are privileged to have with us in studio the woman who has been selected and to address the nation as national orator on Saturday as we celebrate our independence. We're going to talk about her life story. Whether you agree or not, everyone has a story, and most often successful people have stories that inspire, that motivate. So we thought it wise to ask her to sit with us this morning to talk about her life. On the overall, it seems very impressive, but we'll give her the opportunity to say more. Good morning, Dr. Russell, and welcome to the True Breakfast Show.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here.
How do you feel being here this morning? Is this your first radio interaction live?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, it isn't.
So how is Maryland going? The university, I mean.
The university is going well. We're pleased to have our first graduation in June.
Okay. And I must say, I've heard a whole lot of good news about the university and the good work you're doing there. For and on behalf of the people who believe in change and positive change, we want to tell you thank you and for the good job. On the overall, you were born and brought up in the county now that you work in. You went to school there, later on in England, in the United States. You've been around for some time working in academia. In fact, from your CV, I understand you work as Vice President for Academic Affairs at the prestigious New York State University. And so you've been around for some time. You were awarded 2 Doctors of Humane Letters by the Chicago School of Professional Psychology and Forest Institute of Professional Psychology, as well as recipient of the Outstanding Psychologist Award from the New York and the Chicago branches of the Association of Black Psychologists. Very impressive CV. But there's one thing I'm showing that this is my first time hearing that. I've heard about psychologists. I've never heard about psychoanalytic psychotherapist. So to start, you want to give us a small light on what that constitutes?
Yes. Within psychology, there are many different emphasis or fields.
Okay.
Psychoanalysis was discovered, brought into existence by Sigmund Freud many, many years ago in the 30s. And the emphasis there was on looking at the mind and the development of the human, the elements that are necessary to help the mind and the infant develop. And so the emphasis he placed was on the first 5 years of life.
Okay.
That what happens in those first five years of life are critical to who the person becomes. So when someone goes into psychotherapy, which is treatment for problems that they have, there's emphasis then on looking at their early development to see what affected them.
So it's fair to say that at a very early age you can determine problems associated with the human mind at that level, 5 years or a little bit above that?
Well, what we've seen and data later proves that is that the first 5 years are critical to the child's development.
Okay.
And that's why those of us who have started early childhood development programs emphasize nurturing the mind, stimulating the mind, because that's when the child is most receptive to external stimuli.
I think this is the reason why we have us to forget our ABC, because we learned that that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, let's give you the opportunity to talk about your upbringing, where were you born, the parents you came from, and the rest of that.
Well, I was born in Harper City, Maryland County, and very early my parents were not together, so I was taken by my father and lived with my paternal grandmother and great-grandmother, that is his mother and his grandmother. So 2 very strong women. Unfortunately, my grandfather had died, and so I didn't get to know him. But growing up in Harper, then my first school was AME Day School, which as you know, is a religious institution. And from there, I went to Cabamas High School, graduated 8th grade, and then came to Monroeville, went to Swan, and completed high school there.
Then thereafter?
Well, thereafter, I went to England for about a year or so and studied for my O-levels in English, chemistry, biology, and from there went to the States and obtained a bachelor's degree in psychology. Then went out to New York University, got a master's in educational psychology. Then went to Yeshiva University, got a doctorate in counselor education. And at that point, there were some changes in my life, so I had originally planned to return to Liberia then. But given those changes, I then decided to go on and get a second doctorate this time in clinical psychology from New York University.
What were the changes in your life?
Well, I got married.
Okay.
And my husband is an American.
Okay.
And so that changed and my immediate coming to Liberia. But I came back and forth to visit my parents. Occasionally would come and spend some time at working during the summers at the University of Liberia or with the National Testing Service, as it was called at that time.
At the university?
Well, this was not part of the university, it was part of the Ministry of Education. At the time, it wasn't a ministry, but the emphasis there was on, I was looking at tests that were being used in Liberia.
Okay.
And one of the things that I discovered as part of testing, and as psychologists engage in a lot of testing, is that some of the tests being used were not normed on Liberian population. That is, the people they were originally developed for did not include Liberians. And so when you do that, you have to be careful by interpreting those tests. So I was helping to look at the applicability of those tests.
Okay. Well, so in the States, while you were in America, who funded your education? Was it a scholarship?
No, my undergraduate education, my parents funded.
Okay.
And then I went on for my parents again funded my master's. For my doctorate degree, I got a competitive scholarship called that is given for people with high grades and whatnot in psychology and other. It's NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay.
So I was able to do that, but by then I was teaching, and so I went to school during the day and taught at night.
Wonderful. A little bit about your parents.
Well, my father is a lawyer by trade. He is one of the sons of Maryland, and at some point he became Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. His name was Onati B. Davis.
Okay.
My mother was from Grancess, and she became a teacher and later became an accountant.
Accountant.
Mm-hmm.
She worked professionally as an accountant?
Yes, she did.
In Maryland?
In Monrovia. She was in Monrovia. No, I did not grow up with her.
No.
I grew up with my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And when my father remarried with my stepmother.
Okay. So how was it then when you were coming up in Maryland?
Well, things were very different than they are now. I see the emphasis, or lack of emphasis now, on some of the basic values that we were taught. And just superficially, you know, things like saying good morning, good afternoon, excuse me, deferring to your elders, etc. That kind of respect that you showed your elders. I see an absence of it now. But when I was growing up, you know, when you are a kid and your parents are hard on you, you think, oh, they're the most cruel people in the world. But in retrospect, you find that the life lessons that they're teaching you become the foundation for what you become later on. And so the values of honesty, integrity, the value of work, and even though, you know, one of the things my grandmother used to say is that if you did a job, regardless of what that job is, if you had to scrub the floor, you did it to the best of your ability. So that when someone came along and saw that, it gave you a sense of pride in the work that you've done. And that's something that I see missing now, that a lot of people don't have a sense of pride in what they do, and therefore give you substandard work and expect you to be satisfied with it.
As a professional psychologist, that is having an impact on our lives today. Perhaps in the future, what can we do to transform that?
Well,
and build the value system.
One of the things that I see and I mentioned in my speech that I've prepared for the nation is the value of work, the dignity of work needs to be emphasized because it isn't at this point. I think that as we went through the war and came out, we have not yet, all of us, returned to a sense of what it is to be at peace with ourselves. There are many in our nation, and I, as a psychologist and as a researcher, I did a study about a couple of years ago that looked at students in college in across the nation with a large sample in Liberia, looking at the impact of what in the field we call post-traumatic stress disorder. That is that people going through some trauma can be affected, and that there is a residue of that. And I expected that there would be some of that, but I was not prepared for the large number that we saw. That about 56% of the population we studied met the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder.
That they should be subjected to some.
Which means, and part of my interest in this study was that then I could say to the universities, the colleges and universities, you need to develop programs for these students. Because we know that if this is not addressed, there are after effects in person's life, that it affects their ability to concentrate, to study, but they have very often have flashbacks where they go back to the trauma that occurred. So if it were during the war and they saw some horrific things, those flashbacks come back. And there are a series of behaviors. One is the inability to manage anger. And so we see people who get angry at the slightest thing and engage in destructive kinds of behavior.
Like it says that there are many angry persons today.
Yeah.
Did you share that study with the political authority of our country anywhere?
Well, not political authority. What I did was to share it with the National Commission on Higher Education, with the universities around, and made a number of presentations. But I think it's something that we need to address because we haven't addressed it. And as I will say in my speech on Saturday, that we've talked a lot about transformation of infrastructure, looking at rebuilding roads, bridges, houses, etc. But we haven't really talked about transformation of the mind.
Building the team of God.
That's right. How do we change from a warring mindset to a peaceful mindset? And until we do that, until we begin to focus on that and attend to that, there will always be this undercurrent that is there. So it is my hope that we begin in the schools, in the universities, etc., to begin to look at those issues more systematically.
If nothing is done, what will be the effect?
Well, we will have wounded people, so to speak, not physically wounded, but mentally wounded people who are walking around, who then cannot give us their all, their full potential, but can be destructive to themselves and to others.
That sounds very, very interesting.
Now, let me take you back to the educational sojourn. Your speech tells me that it was all rosy when you were coming out as a child.
Rosy?
Yeah, I mean, you didn't experience any constraint or financial difficulties because you were given the opportunity by your parents.
Well, I had to work when I was in college.
Okay.
So even though my parents were paying my tuition, I worked at the university to have money to buy my toiletries and things like that I needed. And then in graduate school, I also worked, as I indicated, that I taught. I was teaching undergraduate psychology then as an assistant professor. So I arranged my schedule so I taught at night and went to school during the day. So I don't know if rosy is exactly the word I'd use.
Who did you see then as a role model?
Oh, certainly within my own family, my two grandparents, my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And I mentioned those in the speech I'll be giving on Saturday.
And what really motivated you?
Well, they presented to me a model of service. These were two women, and both were widows. But I remember as a child going with them in the interior in Maryland County. At that time, there were parts of Côte d'Ivoire that were part of Liberia. And so they traveled there teaching folks, and there are stories that older people tell me about how they changed their lives. They taught them how to read and write, etc. And that's a model for me that and it's interesting because I shied away from becoming a teacher. You know, folks would say to me, "Oh, you do so well teaching," and I said, "I'm not going to be a teacher." And yet I kept gravitating to that because I saw that as a way of making a difference in the lives of people. Even when I became a psychologist and had a private practice, for me it was just changing one life at a time. The teaching, on the other hand, meant a classroom full of students whose lives you were changing. And many of them came from families that had not been to college. So they were first generation college students.
What can you remember as the most memorable event in your educational sojourn?
Oh, there are many along the way.
Can we include it to your whole life? What are the events that changed your life?
Well, I think I'll start with A&E Day School.
The small school in Maryland.
This small school in Maryland, right? It was the pastor of the church, Reverend White, and his wife, who ran the school, and they were strict disciplinarians. And I remember thinking that this is really difficult. I mean, I was always motivated to study. I was a bright student, A's and B student. But the discipline was something that I felt was extremely harsh. And then I went to Swain, and when I got there, again, this was religious institution, but this time it's Baptist. And the principal of the school was Mother May, we call her May Davis, and she too was a strict disciplinarian. So all of my early life was really strict discipline. There are incidents I remember when I was growing up where, and my grandparents were very religious, so we had prayers in the morning and prayers at night. And then every Wednesday we had to go to prayer meeting. And as a kid, sometimes you get tired of that. But if you try to circumvent that, this is something, again, that I see missing, that there is this circle of your parents, but the outside people who also act as your parents. So if
No, the
they saw
community.
the community, so if they saw you misbehaving, they felt free to chastise you.
So the child was owned by the community then.
That's right. That's right. And so you got a beating by any one of those people. And then when you got home, you got another beating. So everyone's eyes were out for you. There wasn't very much room to do get into mischief or anything like that because the community looked out for you.
Was there anything in your life you wish had not happened in your life?
Well, that my father, my brothers, all of us, and from my grandfather, who I mentioned in my speech, who was imprisoned at Balayala for speaking his mind. And so that got me into trouble with my elders. No. And so I wish that there was more opportunity for children to be heard. Because growing up, the emphasis was on children being seen and not heard.
Well, I think that also impacted on the level of discipline that we see in people like you, know?
Oh, yes.
The fact that you listen more than you speak. You don't think so?
I think it had tremendous impact, yes.
You talk about living with your stepmother. How was it? Because typically we know that many stepmothers don't treat children. They are exceptions.
Oh, she was really, truly an exception. We had an extremely close relationship. She was a very loving woman. And her father immigrated here, her parents immigrated here from Jamaica. And so when she and my dad got married, I was about 7 years old. And so she became mother to me.
And she played that really effectively.
Oh, yes, she did.
Okay. Let's move a little bit further. Your life, your husband, your children. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, my husband is a New Yorker. Grew up in New York. He was born in Alabama, but his family moved to New York when he was about a year or two. And so he grew up in the Bronx, in New York. And academician too, honor society kind of thing. So we met at at City University. We were both working. I was teaching and he was director of financial aid. And we got married.
The first day you sighted him, you saw him, did it come to your mind that this is the man you spent your life with?
No, no.
Tell me, how did it happen?
Well, there was a life of mine before that. I was married before.
Okay, that was the second.
So he was my second husband, yes. My first husband was from Tubman, and unfortunately that didn't work out. So when I met my current husband, the last thing on my mind was getting involved with another man. So, but he was persistent, and it's been I've spent now 40 something years of my life with him, so it's been a long time.
How many children?
We have two.
Where are they now and what did they do? What are they doing?
Well, our daughter is a physician
Okay.
in New Jersey. She's married and has two children, two boys, and is on her third, expecting her third child.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Russell. Let's get some interaction for our listeners out there. The number to call is 0777 1730 15. You can also call me as an alternative on 0777 469794.
0777469793.
You get some text messages also on 0777 469795. Let me get this first one through. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Yeah, good morning, Marty and Shalom. Dr. Oration.
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm inspired a lot when I read your pretty nice story and your academic roadmap since you started your journey. I feel fine, and in my view, I thought on my parents, specifically females, should look at that as a trend. Now, tomorrow, as we are prepared, on the 26th, as we are prepared to listen to this percussion's voice and this letting out mood, the comment of academia over the past 12 time, what do you think we should be looking at with respect to the reconciliatory aspect of our country after we came from our civil war, 7 years of debacle? What do you think we should look at in terms of moving the country ahead? Thank you very much. I'm still inspired by your own accolades.
Thank you very much. 0777 469794. Where is it?
Good morning. 0777469793. He's the person is up. 0777469793 is the number to call, and
You can send the text messages on 94. That is available. Good morning and welcome to the show. Good morning. Good morning. Hello? Yeah, go ahead. Hello? I mean, you holding the line? Go ahead. You are live. Go ahead. Yeah, morning. Go ahead, we are. Go ahead.
Good
Speaking.
morning.
Speaking to you. Go ahead. University of Harper.
Some.
Okay. In Harper. Okay, thank you. It's recommended that you allow some of the teachers to teach in the high school at a less busy time. What time you be less busy? Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning, you're live. Go ahead, Jackson.
That's a
Too
very
bad.
cracky line. You want to change your
Lines-
position?
Good morning. Sorry. Too bad. 0777469793.
Go ahead. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning.
How's that? Thank you very much. Good morning. Hello. Good morning. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You're live. Go ahead, Chris. Okay. He's reporting that there was a mass failure at Kipama High School. What do you think about that, sir?
Yeah, we'll take this call. Good morning. Good morning. Walk away from where you are. Please go ahead, sir.
Too bad. Hello.
There's one thing I want to just tell you this
Your line is bad this morning. That line is
Good morning.
Good morning, Monday. Good morning to our morning here this morning. My name is Jimmy Akuri. I speak from District 5 this morning to the second community. I listened to our mother. I think she spoke very well. Basically, I think she's read school in the morning of 9. And I think I just want to state that maybe for her just to clarify or maybe to have the information related to that. The number of girls or women that attend the university what are some of the scandals or young women that we got when we get a woman
Okay, great advice. No, what are some advice you have for young women? Okay, we can go back to our studio guests. I think this is a very terrible line this morning. All right, now a few questions. What are some of your plans or pieces of advice you have for young girls that can motivate them?
Well, one of the programs we've started, I started a group in Harper called the National Association of University Women, which is a branch of an international group.
Okay.
And for the last 3 years, we've been going throughout Maryland County during the month of April, which is Women's History Month,
Okay.
working with young women, showing them that there are possibilities other than dropping out of school. The first year, several of the women went throughout the districts in Maryland County. The last 2 years, what we've done is brought young women from the high schools to shadow some of the women at the university and also within the community. And we've had these women talk with them to mentor them, to show them that indeed there are possibilities, to motivate them. So they've heard the life stories of these women. I think one of the things that Her Excellency President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf said during the graduation address, when she looked at the statistics of the graduates, that we had far fewer women than we had men graduating. And she challenged us to increase that. And we've been trying to do that. The problem is to go down deeper than the high school level, because what we find is young women begin to drop off as they get to junior high school. So the pipeline at high school level then becomes smaller.
Talk a little bit about the university. How is it?
The university is going well. That's not to say we don't have our challenges of funding, etc. But it's been an interesting journey for me to start from scratch and get the university going. Brought together a team. We have 6 colleges, education, So we graduated students in secondary education and primary education and early childhood and guidance and counseling. And in agriculture, we graduated about 18 students in agriculture. In health sciences, about 10 nursing students who got their BSc in nursing. And public health, another 7. Engineering, we didn't graduate any students because we all agreed, including the students, that it needed more practical, more hands-on.
Okay.
So the next class will include engineering.
What's all the stuff? Your stuff?
Our staff, the academic staff,
Qualification.
we require at least a master's degree
Okay.
to be able to teach there.
You have some foreign staff then?
Yes, we do. About 20-something% is foreign,
Okay.
but 87% is Liberian.
What's the current enrollment?
The enrollment is a little over 1,000. That includes our regular students and the students in our remedial program, which we call Access to College.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Rosa, we had a very insightful time with you this morning. You want to touch anything that we didn't touch? Perhaps a little bit about the things you would tell the nation on Saturday?
Well, the speech looks at, as I said before, transformation. What things do we need to change as a people? And some of that means going back to some of the values that I talked about when I was growing up. Integrity, honesty, trustworthiness, etc. And how do we begin to do that? But also a sense of who we are as a people, that we need to focus on that, to see ourselves as Liberians, rather than emphasizing the differences that cause dissension. And to focus on what it means to be a citizen, a responsible member of this nation.
Okay. Before you go, when you were taught to serve, what are the few things that come to your mind? Leaving the United States, coming back home to serve the people?
Well, my brother, younger brother.
After hearing the things about the war, the destruction.
Well, I knew that there were challenges because I had come before I was asked to serve as part of a delegation to assess higher education in Liberia. And so I saw the destruction firsthand. I knew what the challenges were. And so when the president asked me if I would come back and help out, I told her I would have to first discuss it with my family. But it's been, for any educator, the opportunity to build from the ground up and to see the results of that. And given the years I've spent in higher education, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so to be able to put together what I consider best practices and to craft an institution.
How you been going? How you been going?
Change comes hard. I think we as humans get set in our way, but I think we make it.
Wonderful. Dr. Russell, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to talk to the nation, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Okay, this is how we go on this segment. We'll be right back.